What a day, what a week it has been in the Carolinas. At least one confirmed tornado in North Carolina today, and this coming on the heels of a very fiery weekend in the Carolinas. It is Wednesday, the March the 5th, 2025, and you're streaming the Carolina Weather Group. I'm James Brierton in Charlotte, and welcome to this live edition of the Carolina Weather Group, streaming on YouTube and on Facebook. And if you missed us last week, hopefully you had a chance to check out our audio-only episode that we put out on your favorite audio podcast platform. But we're back. Our faces are here this week. We've got Scotty Powell in Myrtle Beach, who'll be talking about those wildfires and the Carolina forest fire coming up. We got Frank Strait in Columbia, South Carolina, who's helping us track...
With Stormy the Weather Cat.
Oh, with Stormy the Weather Cat! And WCNC Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich is here because what a day we had as March kicking off severe weather preparedness week. And I hope you all enjoyed today's lifetime drill across the Carolinas, because from west to east, that squall line probably rocked you at some point, starting first in the western half of the state and about 8 a.m. here in Charlotte, and then off to the east just a little while ago, finally getting the last bits of it out to sea. But Brad, this is terminal Doppler radar. The one tornado we have confirmed so far right here in Union County, North Carolina.
Yeah, typical what we call QLCS tornado, quick spin up that occurred on a squall line. I don't think I even heard thunder today. There was no lightning with these cells. So kind of interesting to see that. And this thing really spun up pretty quickly. I'll give credit to the Weather Service did a great job with their warnings today, because at least they had severe thunderstorm warnings out way ahead of time. The tornado watch came out, and then the tornado warning came out pretty close to the time the tornado touched down. But there was a big indication of some damaging wind risk, which was, keeping people safe. But the thing that is eerie about this one, there was a lot of consternation online from parents because some schools were closed, some were delayed, others were not. I mean, I feel like this is always a debate. It's district to district kind of policies. But this tornado actually touched down on the campus of Porter Ridge High School, middle school, elementary school. It's a big campus there in Western Union County, and all three schools are like on this big campus. And that's actually where this tornado touched down initially, caused some damage on the campus to some fences, some trees, some cars had their windows blown out. I just got a picture of a soccer goal was pretty much moved off a soccer field in a pretty far distance. But luckily, nobody was injured or hurt, because most of the kids were in class and they were doing their safety precautions, which, as you mentioned, James, this was Severe Weather Awareness Week. We should have been doing the state tornado drill today.
Well, we did it for real.
Yeah. So I'm sure the parents and the teachers and faculty were getting ready to do a drill this week anyway. So they've got the real deal. And I think in some cases might be a good thing. It might make these kids really appreciate the fact that this is why you do these drills.
Yeah, you mentioned the first area of debris right there at that complex that houses those three schools, and then it continued down the road. I had a chance to visit there earlier this afternoon.
The National Weather Service office in Greenville, Spartanburg, quick today to say that they'd be coming out here to Union County, North Carolina, to survey storm damage in this community. It's the best way for meteorologists to know exactly what caused the damage. Was it damaging winds from a thunderstorm that were coming in a straight line fashion, or possibly the rotation of a tornado? At the time, a tornado warning had been issued for this community because of rotation seen on radar. Now, meteorologists will look to see exactly which trees fell, which way they fell, and what type of buildings may have sustained damage in order to estimate which way those winds may have been moving and exactly how strong they were.
Issued the tornado warning this morning at 8:31 a.m. and based on radar estimates and where the first damage point was, it looks like the tornado touched down at approximately 8:34 a.m. But this was a very fast-moving storm, moving at about 50 miles an hour. So it was really only on the ground for about 3 minutes. So it looks like it lifted at about 8:37 a.m. So again, very fast-moving storm, was not on the ground for very long at all. And again, it was a preliminary rating of an EF1.
School buses like this one behind me were just arriving to school this morning here in Union County when the storms hit. Union County opting to keep its schools in session today, despite cancellations and delays in school districts nearby.
We use all the data that we have at our disposal to issue warnings, and we were heavily using the Charlotte, what we call the terminal Doppler weather radar, which has 1 minute data. And that was what we were using in this case to issue the warning. And by having that data at our disposal and available for our meteorologists, they're able to get out the best warnings possible in this case.
As I've been driving along this road, it seems indiscriminate on where the storm damage is. This particular tree suffering storm damage, while some of the trees around it don't seem to have a scratch on them. The National Weather Service is mapping this to find out the exact path the debris took today. The National Weather Service looking at damage such as this to a home under construction along Friendly Baptist Church Road, just across the street from the complex that houses the community's elementary, middle, and high schools. Part of the debris on this property includes these pieces of metal, which were picked up and thrown into the trees. Where they exactly came from, I can't say for sure, but as the winds continue to howl here in Union County, these pieces of metal have been heard banging up against the trees, a piece of storm debris that'll have to be cleaned up before it's picked up and thrown someplace else. I've just taken a short drive. This is now Lawyers Road. We're just down the street from where I showed you that damaged home. This is where power crews have been out all day installing at least 8 new utility poles, because as the storm came through this morning, the wind snapped these poles in half and knocked down wires onto the ground. Now these crews have had to operate safely amongst really gusty wind conditions, which can be hazardous when they're up in bucket trucks. The road remains closed as crews work to get those power poles and power lines restored. For now in Union County, I'm James Brierton for the Carolina Weather Group.
And I have to say, it was very windy out there still at 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So thanks to the wind cancellation on those microphones. But Brad, did you notice in their P&S that they put out today, they talked about that home that was damaged. And did you read the part about how they thought the wind funneled through the home?
Yeah, I got in through the garage, which is always the weak point of any, structure, and kind of helped blow out part of that roof. And it's always tough when I think it's hard to do damage surveys when you have homes or buildings under construction, because they're not completely at their maximum structural soundness. So, but that, I was glad you shot that video. That was close-ups, the closest pictures I've seen. That was pretty extensive to see that damage there. What's interesting is, I think you made a good point that it was kind of sporadic, the damage along the way. And I think that was more an indication of these QLCS tornadoes, which don't always build from the mesocyclone down. Sometimes they spin up near the ground, and so they tend to ebb and flow a little bit. Their formation is definitely a little bit different than a supercell tornado. So that kind of makes sense that it was kind of more sporadic.
It was also interesting to me, and I think you talked a little bit about this on social media today, is, you very quickly leave the Charlotte sprawl. And while it's still heavily agriculture out there, it has transitioned a lot in recent years and decades.
Yeah, so I did this, I think it was like 3 years ago. I started doing, I'm a big stats and climate geek. I love looking at like past data. So there's some really cool sites out there, like the Tornado Archive, and the Midwest Climate Center has some great tornado mapping, which maps every tornado in the country. And the Tornado Archive is actually pretty interesting because, our database for the Storm Prediction Center only goes back to like 1950. The Tornado Archive, they've done deep dives into like newspaper clippings and witness accounts of tornadoes that occurred in like the 1800s even. And so what made me interested was I had a couple of local residents that are new to the area tell me that we don't get tornadoes here. And it's maybe asked them like, well, who told you that? And it's like, well, that's just what we heard when we moved here. And I was like, oh, we get tornadoes here. In fact, I started looking at these EF4 tornadoes that have occurred in the past in Western Union County. And for the folks that aren't from the Charlotte area, we are one of the fastest growing urban areas in the country. And Western Union County is one of those areas. Back in 1989, when the EF4 hit then in May, there was none of these suburban developments. This school complex was built in like 2005. It wasn't even there. A lot of these strip malls, I mean, nothing was there. The population growth has been crazy. And so this is a great example. If that EF4 tornado hit today, it would have crossed over almost the identical spot where Porter Ridge High School, middle school, and elementary school is. So you'll see a lot of researchers talk about this, that, as we get urban sprawl and urban areas get bigger, we become bigger targets for tornadoes. There's that long-standing myth that cities don't get hit by tornadoes.
Right.
It really was just luck. Tornadoes are, tiny, and cities are tiny. So for them to meet up is kind of a chance meeting. But as these urban areas like Charlotte and Raleigh and Atlanta grow in size, now the urban footprint becomes bigger, and the target for these tornadoes will become bigger. So it is really interesting to see there's that part of Western Union County has had probably the strongest tornadoes in the Charlotte metro area. At least 2 of them have occurred there. And Trish actually mentioned this today, which I thought was a great fact she threw into her press conference. We have never had an EF5 in North South Carolina or Georgia. So, but we've had a lot of EF3s and 4s, more so than people think. Not one recently, but those, overwhelmingly cause the number of fatalities. While we get a bunch of EF0s and 1s, they call it damage, all tornadoes are serious. They tend to be less deadly than the bigger tornadoes, which we get fewer of.
And we'll talk more about Trisha Palmer, the National Weather Service, and of course the recent headlines in the past week about budget cuts to NOAA and the National Weather Service coming up a little bit later on in the program. But I know we're getting some comments about what other areas saw storm damage today in the Carolinas, and we're focusing a lot here in the first part of our show about this EF1 that was confirmed in Union County, because at this hour it's the only one that has been confirmed, but we might get more. And let's show you what we preliminarily know tonight about the damage that was produced by this storm as it made its way across the Carolinas today. I'm going to pop up on the screen right now. These are the storm reports that the National Weather Service has verified, and you can see the plethora of them. You can also see the polygons, the yellow being severe thunderstorm warnings and the red being the tornado warnings that were issued. Lo and behold, mostly damaging wind, severe thunderstorm warnings, just a very few red polygons for tornadoes, and only one confirmed tornado there on the map so far in Union County, South Carolina, as we stream to you on this Wednesday. It's possible National Weather Services elsewhere may confirm some other ones when they get out and look at the damage, because we did have one on the northern side of Raleigh today. We also had one over Winston-Salem, but Frank Strait, we know that these two over Columbia woke you up this morning.
Indeed, they did. There was one, and this one was before I woke up. The one that was a little further northwest of Columbia. That one actually did cause some significant damage, but the National Weather Service, when they surveyed it, they did not find any evidence of a tornado. They found it was straight line winds that caused the damage in that area, as best they can tell. Now, the one further south, well, that's the one that woke me up this morning. It was only about 5 minutes before my alarm was going to go off anyway, but that one came out at about 7:30 this morning, and woke me up. And so before I even looked at my phone, I was in the closet because I knew what it was. I knew it was a tornado warning because that's the only alert I have turned on my phone. So I went in there and checked the radar and realized, well, there's a rotating area, but it's actually not tracking near me. It's going more toward the airport. So I knew I was going to be okay. But obviously, a lot of people in Columbia were taking cover first thing this morning. Those who weren't already out the door. I mean, 7:30, a lot of people are already on the way to work at that point. So this hitting during the morning rush certainly did complicate things down here in Columbia.
Brad, let's talk about that morning rush, because this certainly did time not only with the morning rush to work, but also the morning rush to school. I would say somewhat controversially, some districts deciding to close while others not closing. And I think we kind of saw both sides of that coin today.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I'm glad I don't make these decisions. I mean, let's just be honest. It's tough. I think it's something I think I've really seen, and maybe you guys could remember. I think after the 2011 outbreak, the Tuscaloosa outbreak, and kind of the new super outbreak back then, in April of 2011, there was this big influx of more schools releasing for severe weather days in the mid South and the far South, I would say. And I think the big thing is, I'm kind of torn on this because I honestly think schools are actually a very safe place to be because just like today, they do drills. They all know what to do. They have adults that will tell them what to do. And at home, I don't know how many of these homes are structurally sound. Maybe they're not brick and mortar. Maybe they're modular or mobile. Maybe they've never done a tornado drill or even know where to go in their house or get alerts. So in some ways, I think schools are a safe place to be. But I think the problem with this morning, and we can all attest to this, is the last place you want to be in severe weather is on the road, outside, at a bus stop. So when these severe weather events time out with the morning bus stop commute time or the afternoon evening commute time, I think there's always a little wiggle room where the schools are like, yeah, we probably want to avoid that because buses are high profile vehicles. They're not exactly the safest thing to be in a severe thunderstorm warning or tornado. And we've seen them drive into floodwaters, among other things. So maybe being in school is safe, but I think the whole point is, are you getting to school safely to begin with? And I think that was the problem this morning. And then we've had a bunch of snow days this year. Let's be honest too. We've had snow, 3 or 4 times for the first time in 3 years. So I think a lot of these schools actually ate up some of their weather days. And so that also probably played a part in some schools deciding, well, we don't have any more days we can take. We don't want to use up spring break or holidays. So I think that also played a part. And that's one of those things, like, we all don't know that. We don't know each policy's number of days left. And parents probably don't know that either. Some do, but I think that's one of those things. That's why I don't like making these decisions, because I don't know all the variables. I only know the weather part. I don't know all the variables that the school district knows. And so that's why I don't ever like to assume they made a good or bad decision, because I don't know those other variables.
I was surprised when CMS texted me last night.
Yeah.
And then as I was standing in Union County today, looking at this damage in close proximity to a school that was letting kids in at the time, I was like, oh, I kind of get it now.
Yeah. And that's the thing, I made a meme today because I honestly, for every parent that was mad that school was closed, there'd be just as many parents that would be ticked off if something happened to their kid. And so I think you're in a no-win situation, right?
Yeah.
But I will tell you this, something I've learned working with emergency management is, we have risk tolerance, right? We all of us would do things that probably other people wouldn't do. The problem is when you make decisions for other people and other kids, you can't use your risk tolerance. You have to use the lowest common denominator. And so there's things I would do with my family that I feel safe with that I would never trust my kids' friends with us to do, because I don't want to be the responsible person for other people's safety. And so that's why I think sometimes these school administrators have a tough job, because they basically have got to make decisions not for the majority of the people. They got to make it for that small segment of their student population who maybe doesn't have a safe way to get to school. They have to go on the bus, or they don't have a safe place to go. And so I think those are decisions that I said they're much more complex than I think a lot of parents even understand.
Let's pop up the map again. Again, this is what the National Weather Service offices today issued. Those are the polygons you see on your screen. And then each one of these icons, the little wind icons, the little tree icons, these are all verified storm reports that the meteorologists at the National Weather Service have verified, populated, and are sharing with us here tonight. They're the same ones you'll see on television with Brad and others tonight as well too. So you can kind of see how almost every corner of the Carolinas in some form or fashion was touched by today's severe weather, and we'll expect some of these areas to also be filled in as reports and things are finalized. But Brad, we keep mentioning this tornado drill again. I guess we should say this was the week that everyone, both North Carolina and South Carolina, were advocating for Severe Weather Preparedness Week. And actually, Frank, I think you said it perfectly. You immediately went to your closet, which is your safe place, today when you heard those emergency alert tones go off. So, Frank, I know you guys there in state government in South Carolina rescheduled the tornado drill there for Friday, as did North Carolina. So I guess just briefly, Frank, what is a safe place for anybody who doesn't have one?
Well, your safe place is going to be, first thing, this is something you decide upon in advance. When I woke up this morning and heard my phone blow up and know there was a tornado warning, I knew where to go. I didn't think about where I might want to go. I made this decision in advance because that's what you have to do. You may not have time to decide, oh, well, maybe the closet's my best spot. Maybe I should go in the laundry room. Maybe I should go somewhere else. You don't have time to think about that when there's a tornado warning. That tornado may be 10 seconds away when you hear that, when you hear your phone blow up because of the tornado warning being issued. So you need to get up and go to your safe spot before you do anything else when a tornado warning is issued. You grab the kids, grab the cats if you have time. Well, you go grab the kids. It wouldn't matter what, I guess, but you get to your safe spot immediately, and then you can start assessing things. And again, you decide on this in advance so that you can just react. Now, what is your safe spot? Well, it's the most reinforced area of your house. It's an interior room. Like for example, my closet. It's an interior. There's at least 2 walls between the interior of that closet and any outside. And there's no other place in my house like that. Well, I guess the laundry room would be, but there's not enough room for me in the laundry room, so it doesn't count. If there wasn't a washer and dryer in there, it'd be a better spot. But unfortunately, there's no room for me, so it can't be a safe spot.
Sure.
So that's why I chose my closet, because there's room for me in there, and there's room for my cats too, and so forth. So that's where I would go, and that's where I would bring anyone else and my pets in the event that a tornado warning is issued. And again, reaction time, I was in there in 15 seconds.
Good.
I
Yeah,
grabbed my
that's real
phone
good.
and went in there. So that's what you're doing. You're thinking about those things. What is the best spot where this room is going to be most resilient to the outside winds. Maybe your home was designed with a reinforced room. They do this a lot out in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Maybe you thought to do that when you had your house built. That'd be great. Now, not a lot of people in this part of the country do that, but
I don't have
it's something you can think about if you're about to get a home built. What room in your house, a closet, a laundry room, so forth, that's in the interior of the house. That is the best spot for you to go. So that's something you can think about if you're about to build a house.
And
but again, you're trying to put as many walls as you can between where you are and the outside to save you to produce as much protection as you can put between yourself and the tornado's winds.
And Brad, it feels like we inevitably always get this question, and I know you've got a great explanation for it. So in the name of severe weather preparedness, could you remind our viewers the difference between a watch and a warning?
Yeah, so a watch, we like to use the great illustration of cupcake watch versus cupcake warning. And you could use tacos or cake or cookies, whatever your favorite beverage or food is. But a watch means you have the ingredients in place for something to happen. In this case, we had the ingredients for tornadoes. And once a warning is issued, that means you either have spotted a tornado, a trained spotter, or it's being detected on radar. And radar can do a lot of things. It can tell us if there's rotation, but it also can tell us if the tornado has touched down and there's debris signatures on the radar. So the radar is a really good tool, but something like 70% of tornadoes, though, are just radar indicated and not always necessarily on the ground. But the whole point is it's a predictive mechanism. So we're trying to get ahead of the tornado. It's no good warning you about a tornado after it's on the ground, though that does happen. The whole point is to try to be predictive and forecast the tornado forming before it touches down. So a lot of times that does lead to some false alarms, but I think most people understand that, yeah, we've got to do that. And so anytime we see a warning, you got to take it seriously. Just assume a tornado is imminent. It's either forming or it's going to form. So that's the warning watch process. And today it worked pretty well. I mean, really well forecasted event. We were in the outlook, the 15% outlook, 7 or 8 days.
7 days ago.
So again, just goes to show you how well forecasted these events are. And we did pretty good. The wind was really, what we were expecting. I will say I was a little shocked we had so many tornado warnings. They weren't a ton, let's be honest. Like you said, you kind of highlighted them perfectly. But I didn't think we'd see many tornado warnings until this line got into eastern part of the Carolinas. The fact that it started doing this a little bit earlier was kind of the only surprise for me, really, this morning.
Yeah, there was a moment this morning before the sun came up where I went, I wonder if this is going to verify. And I think lo and behold, it did. It did.
There we go.
Although we should check in real fast with Scotty Powell in Myrtle Beach. Scotty, how did you guys fare there along South Carolina coast? Did it verify for you?
It didn't verify. we had like one severe thunderstorm warning in Scotland County, which is near Laurinburg, but that was about it. I mean, it was very gusty. I would say that, as Brad alluded to, the damage and wind threat was there. We never really had we had some lightning, but not really any main thunderstorms. But the winds were pretty gusty. In fact, I was just looking at the Wilmington update from the National Weather Service. A lot of places saw anywhere between 45 to 55 mile per hour wind gusts today, just outside of those thunderstorms. So we had a lot of wind energy here in the Eastern Carolinas, and any of those heavier showers was allowed to kind of bring that wind down to the surface. So, but as far as like just a line of damage and thunderstorms or tornado warnings, we didn't have any tornado warnings at all in the Wilmington area. Neither in the Charleston area either that I can think of right off top hand. I think it kind of just stopped in the Columbia, Raleigh, and then obviously GSP market. But as it got towards the coast, no really organized severe weather. So we kind of dodged a bullet with that because we've been dealing with our own
Yeah, we're
stuff
going to
down
get to
here
that.
at the coast. So,
Yes.
but I'll tell
There's
you
nothing
what.
going on in Myrtle Beach. What are you talking
I'm
about?
telling you, I never thought I would be talking about forest fires and tornadoes in the same day, but that's where we are
Yeah.
here in the Grand Strand.
I'm going to keep teasing those for just a moment because we do want to talk a lot about those fires. But Brad mentioned it just a moment ago that today's severe weather outbreak, although it spared the Myrtle Beach area, and you know what, it's a good thing that it did. We did get a heads up from the meteorologist at NOAA 7 days in advance that we had a chance of seeing severe weather. You've seen on TV, you've seen on this show, we'll do the SPC outlooks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 risk of seeing severe weather. And we typically only show them day of, next day, or maybe 3 days in advance. But this was 7 days in advance that we got a heads up that something might be happening. And this is a good opportunity, I think, to talk a little bit about what the National Weather Service does. This is not a political podcast by any means, but we have before, and we will again take a pro-National Weather Service stance for all the hardworking meteorologists across the country. And Brad, you've been posting on social media about this. Reading your Twitter now for the audio podcast listeners, it is dumbfounding you, right? The lack of understanding. Like I said before, we have the saying, we don't need farmers when we have grocery store moments in weather right now. You're arguing, well, where do you think the weather comes from? So, Brad, where does all the weather data come from?
Yeah, all the data collection, the infrastructure of satellites, weather balloons, radar, Doppler radar, surface observations, buoy data, airplanes taking off and landing. I don't think people realize that every time a commercial aircraft takes off and lands, it sends us weather data. That is all collected and consolidated and used to send out to the public for free. Yes, there is, we pay for it with tax dollars, but this goes out to everybody for free. Then that is put into numerical modeling, and numerical modeling is kind of the ground floor of how we forecast. It's the biggest tool we use to put a forecast together. And on top of that, the Weather Service does their own forecast. It's a public facing forecast. So these warnings that we got today, everybody gets them for free on their phones. You don't need an app. We get WIAs, wireless emergency alerts. They come from the cell phone carriers, and the FCC allows us to come from the cell phone towers. So there's absolutely, nothing you have to pay. It doesn't come off your data fees or anything. And without the Weather Service, we would not have weather forecasts. And the biggest thing that I think people don't understand about the weather is how ingrained it is into our economy. One of my biggest pet peeves, and it's been a pet peeve for a long time, is, why is the National Weather Service and NOAA in the Department of Commerce? I know why it's there, but that's also why it gets targeted for cuts a lot by the government, because when you want to cut, and we should be cutting and obviously looking for ways to reduce the federal deficit, you look for departments, and the Department of Commerce, you're like, what do they do, right? We're just going to cut money for them and not realize that NOAA and the National Weather Service is in there. The reason they're in the Department of Commerce is every part of our economy needs weather data, whether it's agriculture, aviation, logistics. When I talk about logistics, FedEx, UPS, the U.S. Postal Service, Amazon, Walmart, Target, Lowe's, Home Depot. None of these companies can ship stuff and get their supply chain going without weather data. And so I think we really don't grasp how important that is. And then even into commodities markets, trading in natural gas futures and pork bellies and grain and energy futures. So a lot of this is all based on this weather data. And so it's probably the best bang for our buck in the government. It's the most efficient, most useful thing that we have. In fact, I would argue often there's not enough money and it's underfunded. As we know locally, we're trying to get a Doppler radar here because there's no money for it, and it's understaffed. Going into these cutbacks, guys, I don't know if you guys realize this, but I was talking to my friend in the Weather Service. He was saying at the start of the year, there were 600 vacancies in the National Weather Service going into the year, meaning they were 600 people short before any of these cuts even happened here in the last month or so. So it just kind of show you how strapped they are for people already. And what has happened since the beginning of the year is there was two things. I think the layoffs of the probationary employees was the big thing. But remember, there was that first cut of saying, giving everybody the fork in the road, it was called. You have until March 1st, or I think it was March 5th. I can't remember what day, but to take a buyout that basically would pay you through September with full salary and benefits, or you could be terminated. And so what happened is a lot of the senior forecasters, the MICs, the people that have been in the government for a long time that were within a couple years of retirement said, you know what, I'm going to do that because I'm going to get paid through September. I was probably going to retire in a year or two anyways. So you lost all these really smart high-end people off the top, and then the probationary firings took all the entry level and the people that recently got promoted at the bottom. And so you took away a big chunk. It's like having the Panthers cut all their rookies and their draft class and also let go of all the veterans. And it's like, then who's left on the team, And so I think that was the problem. But the one thing I'll tell you, and James, I don't know if you even saw this, there seems to be some kind of reversal happening with the probationary firings.
I've not seen this, but that's par for the course, it feels like.
Yeah, so there was a memo set out, I think yesterday late, that went out and said, hey, that there's going to be a hold on probationary firings. But the problem is a lot of the firings already went out. So just like we saw with some of these other, there's a whole trying to rehire people. So there's definitely a hold on that. And then there's a whole terminating the leases for buildings, right? And that's a whole nother can of worms.
That's a whole nother can of worms. I want to show this other tweet you have because I thought it was a good explanation too. Talking about the leases, you wrote, this will literally bankrupt the U.S. If you ever wonder why NOAA, the National Weather Service, is in the Department of Commerce, as you were just explaining on the show here, I have some news for you. Every single dollar you wrote on X of our economy is impacted by weather. Then you went on to say they moved every piece of IT back in 2012 into a main building so that all of the computing power of NOAA and the National Weather Service is based in one building. The irony, you wrote, is that this was done for efficiency and for cost cutting. So there is not separate facilities for all these different departments. All of the numeric modeling, that is to say the computer models for weather for NOAA and National Weather Service, come from these supercomputers and data centers. These are things we've done shows on here in the Carolina Weather Group. Well, whether it was intentional or a bot or whatever, the top comment on this, well, they could have just migrated all to the cloud. This is their cloud.
That is the cloud.
The cloud still lives somewhere.
Well, and that's the thing. And this is why I think this, and I actually put it in one of my first tweets. I think it will get reversed because I don't think they realized what this facility was. And that's a problem because, Dr. Jacobs, who's going to be, who got confirmed for the head of NOAA, who was the head of NOAA during Trump's first term, is actually a pretty good scientist. He's very well respected within the Weather Service because he's a rank and file forecaster who worked his way up there. He isn't even in place yet, and these cuts are happening. So I think what's happening is as these secretaries are getting into their position, they're going, hey, guys, we know our department's better. If you want us to reduce the force, let us know, and we'll pick and choose what's not necessary instead of just, taking a sledgehammer and cutting randomly. I thought Dr. Cliff Mass out in Washington State wrote a great blog about this, saying, he agreed that NOAA needed some pruning, but the problem was they're coming in and chopping down the whole tree. And it's like, there's some branches that need to be trimmed. Yes, but you're cutting the base of the trunk of this thing off, and that's going to end up costing us money. So that's what I thought was the irony of this building, especially the NSEP building there in Maryland, is as you guys know, the Weather Service has done this over years. They consolidated. There used to be an office in Charlotte. There used to be an office in every city, and they consolidated and shrank. And they're always looking for ways to save money and be more efficient. And so that building in 2012, when it opened, was their way of taking the Climate Prediction Center, the Ocean Prediction Center, WPC, HPC, NSEP, the Environmental Weather Model. They're all in the same building. They were in separate buildings at one point, right? And they're in this building. So this is the cost saving thing, and they're cutting that. So that's why I think it's going to get reversed. That's why part of me is like, yeah, it's frustrating, but I'm having a sneaky suspicion that because nobody knew that these things were important, that they're all going to get reversed. But I don't know. I'm hearing from the Weather Service people what this has done. It's really reduced morale within the Weather Service. And the people that are working their butts off in severe weather, and their morale's down, and that is not good. I think that's going to lead to mistakes.
Well, it's like you said, they did a great job today, and it's like when they've had government shutdowns and these people have been working without being paid, that's a different scenario. But like those are things that eat away at your morale. Yeah,
and James, the other thing is, and I think we take this for granted. This is shift work, right? Mm-hmm. This is 24/7, 365. There's no holidays. There's no days off. I mean, yeah, you have days off, but somebody has to be working every minute of every day because the weather does not stop. Okay. And we know because we've worked long hours, but you've got to have somebody on call all the time. So when people say, hey, this is like a regular business, it's not. It's not like you're building widgets, right? And you can take a 6-month break to reconsolidate the factory and build more widgets. We're going to have weather for the next 6 months. We're going to have planes flying. We need data all the time. We can't take a break. So part of my frustration would be if you want to reconstitute the Weather Service, you need to have a roadmap and a plan before you stop something, right? And so it'd just be like my car insurance. If I shop for new car insurance, I don't cancel my previous policy until I have a new policy in place. And so for what I'm seeing a lot is we're canceling the policies first and then figuring out what to do later, which is a big, big problem.
Yeah. I know this is not just something that we feel or that you feel, but I also want to show one more Facebook post, and this comes from James Spann, a very popular broadcast meteorologist. He's been on our show. He's the host of the popular Weather Brains podcast, and he took to Facebook and, in his words, wrote, "Longtime followers here know that I don't talk politics, and this is not a political content." He goes on to talk about some of the things we just talked about, the morale, the consolidation, the understaffing, and then he writes, "If the National Weather Service products and services are reduced, we all suffer, especially during times of life-threatening weather." Well, I can't speak for Mr. Spann on his politics. He said it's not a political post, and I believe him, but he's posting to an audience in Alabama, which we know is very heavily Republican. So a post like this in these political times risks alienating viewers or the public, and he's taking this stance again of saying, this is a very important service that these people do regardless of politics. And I thought that was a very well constructed post.
Yeah. And James, the Weather Service is a very bipartisan organization. I put up a survey that was done in February of all the government agencies among Republicans and Democrats. It was the most popular agency. Among Republicans, it was more popular than ICE and DOGE. So, it tells you how popular the Weather Service is. In fact, some of the biggest proponents of the Weather Service, the biggest champions, are congressional delegations from Alabama, Oklahoma, Kansas, because they know how important severe weather is and this weather information is. And I think they understand that this is the best bang for the buck. And so when we talk about cost savings and like, hey, what should we cut here and there? The one thing I'll tell you, the Weather Service, for every $1 we spend in tax money with them, they return about $73 to $74 on that dollar. So so for everybody out there who just says, all right, you know what, we don't need it, we'll privatize it. Well, guess what? Instead of paying $1 for weather data, you're going to have to come up with $74 somewhere to come up to pay for weather data. And I don't think a lot of people can afford that. And the most vulnerable people are the people that probably can't afford the weather data. And who would, I saw a great post on one of my other groups that I'm with, colleagues in meteorology, and because people are postulating, who could take over the Weather Service from a private company standpoint. And pretty much every PhD on there that I follow is like, there's not one company that has the infrastructure and money to do this. It would take multiple companies to do it. So that kind of tells you how complex. And even the head of NOAA in his confirmation hearing said, he told, and I remember watching the confirmation hearing, said, because someone asked him, could you privatize NOAA? And he said, we could, but he says, we could do it cheaper in the government. He was pretty confident that it would be more cost effective for the government to do it than it would be for a private company.
Well, I look at satellite images, we look at radar images, we look at current temperatures, we look at high, medium, low risks of severe weather. Whether you're watching Brad, you're watching somebody else, you're using an app, it's all coming from the Weather Service. All of it.
Think of the tsunami warning center had layoffs. The tsunami warning center. We got to know tsunamis are coming, right? It's kind of an important thing.
Yeah. So we'll see what becomes of this. Like we've mentioned, we're not a political podcast, and I'm not going to pretend to be a political pundit, but we've seen this in other arms of the government in the past month or so, and some of it gets reversed, some of it goes to the courts, some of it goes into lawsuits. We'll see where all this lands, but as of a couple of days ago, there were cuts at NOAA and the National Weather Service, and so thank you to all the hardworking meteorologists, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We still love you, and we appreciate what you do. Mr. Powell, speaking of meteorologists working long hours.
Yes.
Myrtle Beach making the national news this week for all of the wrong reasons. The epicenter of one of the, if not the biggest fires. We saw dozens of them across both North and South Carolina this week. Tell us about the Carolina forest fire.
Yeah, well, this started Saturday afternoon, and back last Thursday, we started seeing fire weather watches issued, and then eventually Friday night into Saturday morning, a fire weather warning was issued for all of the Grand Strand and the PD of South Carolina. In fact, I think a lot of the Carolinas was in that red flag or that fire weather warning. And so everybody's kind of on pins and needles, knowing that possibility of seeing a fire was possible. Here in the Grand Strand region, if you watched myself or any of the other networks, we've constantly been talking about how dry it has been here across the Myrtle Beach area. We have been in a drought, at least a level 2 drought or worse, since back in October. So, it's been very dry here, and it seems like every event that's come our way has kind of dried up before it's got here. The only really long-lasting precipitation was the winter storm we had a couple of weeks ago. I guess now about a month and a half ago, back in January. So it's been very dry. And then you get that, as I always refer to, because I've always heard Brad say it, that southwest wind is a blowtorch wind. So you get that wind coming in out of the south and southwest. And Saturday it was up in the mid to upper 70s, even here at the coast. And so it was just kind of that prime factor of dry conditions, low relative humidity, and gusty winds. We were seeing wind gusts upwards of 30, 40 miles per hour, and it didn't take much for ignition to start. I will say the investigation is ongoing. I will say they are looking at particular places of interest. In fact, this evening I was out there doing some reports, and I saw a fire investigation team out there just kind of looking through the forest and stuff. So there has been one arrest, but this is not associated with the Carolina forest fire.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So that was a person who was arrested for violating the burn order.
That's correct.
The no burn order.
Yeah, so Governor McMaster, Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was Friday or maybe Saturday, he issued a stern warning that says, you need to abide by the burn rule. If you're caught, you will go to jail. And that was direct words from the governor. And so the gentleman who was arrested was contacted by Horry County officials one time and was given a citation. He decided he didn't know about the warning, the burn ban. And then he got called for a second time, and he went to jail. So he is in jail.
Being stubborn.
Yeah, 3 other folks, citations were written to them. But anyways, this fire quickly just spread like wildfire, basically, Saturday afternoon. And by Saturday night, I'm sure you've seen the images of places like the Walker Road area, the Covington Drive area, Tuckahoe Road, where today, and James, you might can pull it up on my Twitter, or it's on
Okay.
the X account. Uh, I've got a picture of that Saturday night where it's went national, world national wide of the
Yeah.
flames and the home and the firefighters being battling those tall flames. And then I was at that house today, and you can kind of see the tops of the trees scorched from the fire. So
Yeah, I
at
have it
the
here.
worst point Saturday night, these flames were very, very high. And so there
Is
you
this it?
go. That's it right there. So that was Saturday night, and then that's the perspective. You can see how tall those pine trees are. And if you take a closer look at that picture of the home today with the blue sky, you can actually see where part of the roof there and the awnings there are melted from the fire, and portions of the roof are burnt from the embers. So it got that close to people's homes. And we are so thankful for Horry County and the entire state of South Carolina and North Carolina who sent fire departments here to help us. As of right now, the only damage is things like this. There was a melted fence, um, melted 2 or 3 melted fences, kind of that plastic fence type
Vinyl.
material, a couple of trampolines that were burned, but no real damage to homes. We haven't lost any structures, and just great fire
Incredible.
protection from all of the folks in Horry County. And I've seen fire trucks from the Charlotte area all the way over to Clemson, South Carolina, to Raleigh. I mean, there's been just Charleston, Johns Island, like the whole states, both North and South Carolina, have been here throughout the last 5 or 6 days helping with this. And so at the point of Sunday is when those videos that was just showing, that's when I went out there after our morning news, and just to hear the stories of those folks who were just basically given minutes to evacuate from their home. And the funny thing about this, and I think Brad will enjoy this as a weather weenie himself, as this smoke plume was going on, it was able, the fire jumped the fire line, and it was about waist to chest tall dry grass. And so once it got in that dry grass, it just torched up like that. And you could literally, we always talk about how fire creates its own weather. And to experience that, you hear the big roar, the big gust of wind. It gets totally dark outside, and it's just like a lot of energy. And that wind is blowing 40, 50 miles per hour. And then fire officials able to put it out, and everything comes back down. And that's what they've been dealing with over the last few days. Is this is in a marshy area that the water, it's just been so dry, it's kind of dried out everything. And it's a peat soil, so the fire kind of gets underneath the soil, and it never really goes out until that marsh kind of fills back up with water to totally eliminate the fire. So it's continuing to smolder, and probably will until we get really good rainfall. So anyways, these are the videos from Sunday, and just hearing the firsthand experiences of people who are living there is just insane. And I've always said, you can prepare for tornadoes with tornado watches and warnings. We can see hurricanes forming, and we have a decent idea of where they're going to go. But forest fires always scare me in the weather world, because a sudden change in the wind can mean major effects in a short amount of time. And so I can only imagine what those folks were dealing with, just hearing their stories. But living through it is a whole different thing. But there's one of the fences that was destroyed. But right now, the fire is at just under 2,100 acres, 44% containment. The burn ban for South Carolina is over, except for Horry and Georgetown counties. Unfortunately, though, the rain that we saw today really didn't do much. I was out there talking about the weather elements, and you could kind of scruff your boots on the topsoil and kind of get away the little wet topsoil, and the ground is just as dry underneath it. So the rain really didn't do much at all, and we're expecting to see breezy conditions again tonight into tomorrow, with relative humidity values in the 30s. So it's not that critical level, but it's still low enough that you have to watch for that concern of seeing fires growing tomorrow and even into Saturday or Friday and Saturday, and then it looks like we have a decent rainmaker moving in Sunday that hopefully will help kind of put some more water on that fire. But at one point you were seeing these scout helicopters, and then you were seeing scout planes, and then Chinook helicopters, Black Hawks, just all the total fire apparatuses that were out there just fighting this fire. And I did a little fire history on Horry County, and 6 of the 7 largest fires in Horry County happen in Carolina Forest. And Carolina Forest, if you're not familiar with Myrtle Beach, is kind of that urban nature interface where Carolina Forest, arguably the most growingest community in Horry County. There's subdivision stacked on top of subdivision, stacked on subdivision, and then right behind it, it was a forest at one time, hence Carolina Forest. And so you've got that inner, that urban and that nature boundary there, and so it doesn't take much for those fires to get going. And so, unfortunately, it happened in the worst spot, and that's kind of where 6, like I said, 6 of the last 7 biggest fires. The one that a lot of people will probably remember, Brad and Frank and James, you may remember the 2000, I think it's 2009, 2008 Highway 31 fire that consumed over 20,000 acres, and it kind of started in the same area. So it has definitely been a very interesting week. And then you're talking about the tornado and damage and wind potential today. It's just been a headache, but we're very blessed that the strong, severe storms didn't pan out for us, because we've had our hands full with dealing with this fire. And I will say this, and I could talk all night about it, but Saturday or Sunday, being out there doing the reports, at times it was just ash falling out of the sky, and you would think it would be like snow flurries because the ash was so big. But I've seen wildfires in Western North Carolina, but most of the time they're confined to the mountains. I've never seen wildfires this close to people's homes, where they're literally out there fighting with garden hoses trying to keep their property safe.
Wow.
Absolutely crazy stuff. And with that rain you mentioned can't get here soon enough. Here's a look at what am I looking at here, Frank? Today's rainfall totals, or
no, that's percent of normal rainfall over the last
gotcha.
60 days. That does not count rain today from this morning, for the most part anyway.
You can see 30 to 40% of the rain we should have had, and then you look right on the coastline, and it's less than that. So
the data doesn't go all the way to the coast in most cases, but you can see there that some places have only had down about a third normal rainfall. Those areas in the red are in the 30 to 40% range, and the rest is less than half normal rainfall. That's over the last 60 days, so going back to around the first of the year here. Really, the only place in South Carolina that's close to normal is in the upstate. Some of those places are just a hair below normal.
Yeah. Scotty, you made a good point about the history of that area. And I think what's interesting about the coast and the fires there is you get water in these marshes, right? So the worst case for wildfires is you get growth for half the year and then it dries out. And so you see that a lot in the coastal plain of North and South Carolina, where during the wet season, the summer, into the late summer, we get a lot of tropical moisture, we get a ton of rain, all this vegetation grows. And then we get into our dry season in the winter. And if you get a drought on top of that, it's going to be windy. So it feels like every spring, there's so much vegetation there, and that marsh grass and some of that smaller vegetation just is like paper. As you mentioned, that stuff catching on fire, just crazy. I remember that 2009 fire because we went to the beach that summer, and just looking at the burn scar was crazy. The number of trees that were burned. And I think the other fire in the area was like 1976, and that was like 30,000 acres. So it's just, I think all those happened in April and May. So this to happen in March was a little early, but this is the kind of time of year that we get into this spring fire season.
And I want to remind folks, if you want to learn more about how wildfire weather is being studied right here in South Carolina on our YouTube channel, you can check out this video. We went to IBHS, the Insurance Institute for Home and Business Safety in Chester County, and they turned on their giant wind fans and lit a home on fire during a safe scientific experiment. And it was very much what these guys have been talking about. Fire making its own weather, intense heat, intense wind. This video is up on our YouTube channel right now for our 500th episode, and it's something you really got to check out. And they did this with Caltech and Cal Fire before the big fires near Los Angeles. So, that's a lot of amazing data that is being collected here in South Carolina for the benefit of the whole country.
Wow.
Before we go tonight, I want to leave on a fun, hopefully optimistic note. Tomorrow, fingers crossed, we should get the second landing of a privately owned lunar robotic mission to the moon. This is Intuitive Machines IM-2, and its name is Athena. Earlier in the week, we had Blue Ghost from Firefly Aeronautics, if I got that right, Aerospace, land on the moon. Both of them are vendors of NASA who purchased some space a part of these missions to go and bring science up to the moon. And just going to highlight two of these things. We got a chance to do a full interview with NASA that's over on our YouTube channel, but we want to talk a little bit about the drill and why they're going to drill into the surface, and a little bit about the hopper, which is like a helicopter thing. So let's listen first a little bit on a clip here about the drill.
This sort of mass spectrometer on there. So if you think about, it's kind of like when you look at elements in different ways, they have fingerprints when you take their spectrum. And so what it will do is it's going to drill down about 10 centimeters, take some samples, bring that up, and then analyze those. And then the next time it drills down, it will go down 20 centimeters. So it will kind of have these 10 centimeter bands as the drill goes down to about a meter. And so, that's the first time we've really been able to drill that well into the regolith.
Into the regolith, which is what she was about to say as they talk about drilling into the surface of the Earth. That is Dr. Nikki Fox. She is the Associate Administrator for NASA's Science Mission Directive. She also talked to me about the hopper, or this little helicopter thing that's on board.
Seems very reminiscent of the Ingenuity helicopter.
A hopper, or a type of helicopter like this, can actually just lift up and then land and do that sort of surveillance of the area. And that has proved to be really valuable. Proved to be very valuable for us on Mars with the Ingenuity helicopter, able to map out the terrain that Perseverance was going to drive through. So that's really kind of the main benefit. You can think of that as kind of the advanced party doing the scouting. Getting into a crater means you're into a permanently shadowed region, so something that the sun has not melted, has not touched, is more likely to be sheltered from like impacts as well. So it's much more pristine, but it's also hard.
And they're hoping inside that crater to find evidence of ice or on water. No sunshine has ever reached into these craters. No robots have ever been over to go into these craters because of the steep angle. And Brad, this is all a part of the Artemis initiative.
Yeah, it's kind of exciting to see this actually taking part, because it seems like everything gets pushed back, all the testing for Artemis, but it's nice to see these other science projects going on to, hopefully get us to the point where, we're going to go back to the moon and eventually to Mars. So it is cool to have two private companies doing this, the kind of competition going on here. And in the back of my mind, James, I'm just thinking like, this is so cool, but I'm like, now they should finish it off with like a battle bots on the moon. They should fight each other, and they should do like pay-per-view to raise money for Artemis.
I'd pay for that.
Well, that would be cool, wouldn't it?
That would be really cool. And speaking of just really cool things, let's see if I hopefully got this right screen share. I mean, check out the video from IM-2. It's going to land tomorrow about 12:30 p.m. Eastern time, and it's just circling the moon tonight. And look at it. Look at the detail of this imagery that we are getting. I can't wait for this thing to land tomorrow.
Yeah, that's what I keep saying about this, Artemis stuff is like, people are like, oh, we went to the moon already. What's the big deal, And I'm like, yeah, it's 2025. Think of the videos and the technology we have to get pictures back that we didn't have in the 60s and 70s, So I think that's what I'm really excited. And to see video like that, you can just see the possibilities of what could happen when we go back. We're just going to learn so much more. And we're also going to spur a whole growth of people fascinated with weather, science, astronomy, because of what we're sending back up there. So I think that's the coolest thing about this whole project.
And if you want to go to the Mars, we got to go to the moon.
Yep. Got to go there first.
Got to go there first. We're running up on about our 1 hour mark. We have two quick things to say. One of them, Frank, you've got something on your calendar this weekend you want to make sure everyone's aware of.
Right. The other positive thing we can talk about on the way out the door tonight is that the next time we do this podcast, it'll be with a post 7 p.m. sunset, because daylight time starts on Sunday. early Sunday morning at 1 a.m. So
Later sunsets also means if
that's
you're a
right.
meteorologist, we're going to go to UTC -5. Which
Oh
will take me-
no!
which will take me
Also-
like,
Also
months
means
of
for
like-
those morning meteorologists, you get one less hour of sleep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's the only thing. I do like the later sunsets, but that lack of sleep, you seem like you
Yeah.
never catch up.
no,
No,
no.
it takes
So true.
forever.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of the lack of sleep, but I do like 7:30 sunset for us here in Charlotte on Sunday is going to be nice.
That does sound nice.
Yeah,
And then
me
we've got the
too.
Crew 10 launch next week. So I don't know what that does, Brad, in terms of trajectory for maybe being able to see that.
Oh
because
yeah,
Wednesday-
that's a good point. I have to look at the launches because that
Yeah.
starts adjusting our ability to like see some. So
Yeah.
that's the one thing. It's so funny how people complain about the early sunsets, but I will say the one benefit is that you get more people to see the sunset and enjoy things around sunset because they're driving in it. And so this time of year, you get a bazillion pictures here at the station, like, oh, this is a gorgeous sunset. Why is the sunset so beautiful? I'm like, because you guys are looking at it. Normally, you're not looking at it the rest of the year because it's so late. You're usually inside doing something, or you're eating dinner or something. So, and the low sun angle helps too.
The absolute worst is when you leave work at 5 o'clock in the winter and it's already dark. That's
Oh, it's the worst. The worst.
We also want to give a special congratulations to our friends over at Weather Brains. Take a look at their YouTube channel. This week they posted episode 998, which means they are just 2 weeks away from the 1,000th episode of
Wow.
Weather Brains. We've said it before on the show. We'll say it again. Our show, the other weather podcast, would not be here if it was not for those trailblazers who set the course for us. We've only done 500. They've done 1,000 week after week.
We're halfway there.
After week. We're halfway. We're coming for you.
They're like the LeBron James of weather podcast. Come on.
James Spann, Bill Murray, most recently on our show when we did our Harleen telethon here on the Carolina Weather Group. We appreciate their friendship of our show, their show, all of the weather pods communities. And we just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge their achievement of 1,000 episodes. And if for some reason you're listening to this show and you haven't checked out their show,
Yeah.
do please go check out Weather Brains. They're a fantastic program.
Yeah, that's definitely first stop usually for anybody who's into weather.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to go there because they set the bar pretty high.
So I'm looking forward to whatever magnificent program they have planned for their 1,000th.
Yeah.
Congratulations, guys.
Great.
I
All right,
hope
that's
it's
gonna do it.
full of James Spann reading mean tweets.
Yeah.
I'd watch that.
They could do that for an hour and keep it
I
entertaining.
know. He needs a whole nother podcast for that.
Yeah.
They should. James Spann should do it. Literally, should do a couple of shorts each day with just him reading. these.
Oh, I think it'd be hilarious. That'd be a great way to kick your day off, you know?
Yeah. Speaking of kicking your day off, has anybody else noticed that James Spann doesn't sleep? He's on
No,
TV in
he
the evenings.
literally
He's
does
posting
not.
on digital in the morning. I don't know what that meant. I don't think he does sleep. I think it's
No,
I think it's the answer.
I don't think he does either. I think he's a vampire.
Now that's a conspiracy theory. Hopefully when we join you back here next week in the Carolina Weather Group, we're not talking about tornadoes. We're not talking about fires. I'll actually just go for a quiet week where we have nothing to talk to you about. That would be fantastic.
That's what I'm hoping for.
We'll talk about pollen.
We'll talk about this weekend storm, how it's taking a perfect storm for us, perfect track for a snowstorm, but it's not cold enough.
Nah, I gotta go. Yeah.
Brad, thank you for your time. We'll see you at 11 o'clock tonight on WCNC Charlotte and WCNC Plus. Scotty Powell, get some
See you
sleep.
Friday
Lots of long
morning.
coverage over there on WBTW. And you'll have to just find Frank and I guess, on Twitter because, we're not on TV. But I'm going to go ahead and roll those credits, and we'll see you back here next week for another edition of the Carolina Weather Group. Be well.
Bye, y'all.